Welcome to the Heart and Soul Wellness Podcast, where we inspire women by teaching applicable skills and tools and assisting them with connecting with one another, healing, and aspiring to their highest selves so they can reach their full potential. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's such an honor. We have Michelle Ellsworth with us today. And I'm really excited for her to share her story with us. And our topic today is the art of healing from grief and trauma. And so, Michelle, I'm just going to give you the opportunity to share your story and your healing journey with us.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I am so excited. One of the biggest things that has helped me heal is to actually share. And so every opportunity I have to share is just a little bigger piece in my puzzle of putting purpose to the pain. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Well, I guess I'll just jump right in, and I typically give people a Cliff Notes version and then allow people to ask any questions that they might have about any one thing that I've gone through, because it's kind of spanned the gamut. So when I was 23, my oldest son, who I was just madly in love with, he was just the cutest little guy in the entire world. His name is James. He actually fell from my second story window when he was 22 months old. And he passed away 5 hours later from blunt head trauma. And it just turned my world upside down. I became depressed. I became suicidal. I was sleeping for 20 hours a day. I was just completely dysfunctional. My PTSD was through the roof, and I was not able to even I wasn't even able to do the basics because I was doing so much mental processing of what had just happened. I came home that night from his passing after he passed away at the hospital to 6 detectives who then investigated me for the death of my child. And that could have not been, aside from his actual death, being investigated was just horrendous. To think that anybody could possibly think that it would be anything other than an accident was just mortifying to my mom's heart. I loved him more than words can ever describe. Anyway, that sent me actually into pretty much a decade from hell. The trauma that I had gone through at that point, I didn't actually know this at the time. I've learned this afterwards, that I became addicted to trauma, and it gives off the same chemicals as opioids when you go through a traumatic experience. And so it was almost like I became addicted to creating traumatic experiences. And I just was not functioning on all the cylinders, to be honest. So I had been married, and I'd been married. My son passed away. Our house foreclosed where he passed away in. It was at the turn of the recession in 2008. We had 2 failed businesses and then $100,000 of debt. And we eventually ended in so much within a year from each other. And we eventually went through a divorce. I was single for 5 years. I was raped. My car was stolen. I had a stalker that tried to break into my home. My daughter almost got kidnapped. I remarried a pathological lying narcissist. He kicked me out of his house. I went to jail in London 6 weeks later, and I came home and met the man of my dreams, and 2 years later went bankrupt for his business. I can laugh about it now, but it was literally a decade from hell. Like it's a miracle that I survived it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, Gosh, my heart just goes out to you. So the man of your dreams that you met, is that the man that you're married to right now?
Yeah. And we've worked through a lot of things and, we're dedicated. And even though it was just horribly hard, he's worth it. So, and we have a baby together and she's the cutest thing ever. She's 8 months old.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh, you really experienced a lot all at once after a huge tragedy. And then it sounds like tragedy on top of tragedy for a period of time, a decade.
It was almost like I hadn't even recovered from one trauma before I got hit with another one. And it was just like one right after another, and there weren't just small traumas. They were extreme traumas on the extreme scale. And yeah, it felt like I was just getting knocked down while I was already on my knees.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, so one thing I'm curious about is, when you experience, and I really appreciate your authenticity and your willingness to be vulnerable. Thank you so much. I think it's so refreshing to hear from someone who's willing to actually talk about the really hard stuff. And so, how did you survive that? How did you survive so much trauma all at once and make it?
It really was kind of line upon line. I felt like my higher power, my God was teaching me all along the way of the next step. But it really all started 5 years after James died, when I had been suicidal and I was wasting my life away in my bed. And so I'm going to get emotional. I'm probably going to cry. But on his 7th birthday, 5 years after he died, I gave him a gift. And the gift was my happiness and healing and wholeness. And I remember laying in my bed and talking to him and just saying, James, today I give you the gift of my healing and my happiness. And I don't know what it's going to take to figure it out, but I won't stop until I do. And really having that promise to James is absolutely what got me through the pain of healing. I don't think that if I had made that promise to myself, I could have broken that promise. But because I made that promise to my baby, who is so important to me, it kept me going, because I had a promise with why my promise was promised to something bigger than myself, which was to James. Like, I can let myself down all the time, but I don't want to let him down,
Yeah. Yeah. So that was a motivating factor for you, your love for your son, to say, I'm going to heal and I am going to keep on fighting for this.
Yeah. And then I really feel like, I know God really taught me about the levels of happiness. And he brought me through each layer and level of what real true happiness is. And I've really identified a solid stepladder, I guess you could say, of happiness. And really the first level of happiness. So I actually started an experiment, and I remember praying, and I would just say, it took me 5 years to get this miserable. It's going to take me 5 years to get unmiserable. And I really just started to experiment with what happiness was. And I was like, okay, I know I'm happy when I have fun. I love having fun. So I'm going to do 365 days of happiness, or 365 days of fun. And after about 30 days, I realized that having fun was not the key to happiness. I found myself at Disneyland, and I was completely miserable. And I was like, if I can't be happy at the happiest place on earth, then happiness is not fun. And so I discovered what happiness was not. And it wasn't about having fun. fun can certainly can add to your happiness, but it doesn't create the happiness. And so shortly thereafter, I found this first step to happiness. I was actually changing my baby girl's diaper in the middle of the night. And as I was just hovering over her, and I was just crying, just sobbing because it's so miserable. And she reaches up and she touches my face, and it's 2 a.m. And she just says, "Mommy, I love you. You're so pretty." And she was almost 2. And right then, the spirit, I'm a religious person. I believe in God. The spirit really spoke to me and said, that is the first level of happiness, is to be present and grateful for what's right in front of you. It's not what's behind you, and it's not what's in front of you. It's what's right in front of you. Did I say that right? It's not what's behind you, and it's not what is in your future. It's what's right in front of you. Mm-hmm. Because I had been living in the past of wishing I could go back to when James was alive, or I was wishing for the day that I could die so that I could be with him again. And I was everywhere but right here. And so I actually learned a little trick to create happiness, or to stay present, was to have a gratitude journal of what I was grateful for every day that I could see, smell, touch, taste, and hear in my 5 senses. And it would get me grounded of what was happening in my right now. What can I be grateful for right now? So that was really the first level of happiness for me. Do you want me to just go through the levels of happiness and hope that really brought me through it?
I would absolutely love to hear that. And I love that you brought up the present moment, because it's so true that if we can bring our attention and focus to what we can control and what we have right here in this moment, and then bring gratitude to that, it's incredible to see how our consciousness can shift in terms of pulling away from something that's creating suffering to something that actually is bringing us true, authentic joy.
Yeah.
I would love to hear the levels of happiness.
So the second level of happiness, and truthfully, these levels are probably also levels of hope. I think that hope really is just when we have hope that things are going to get better. That is where happiness is. We can get through anything as long as we have a hope that they will eventually get better. And for me, it was restoring my happiness. That was where my hope was that my happiness would be restored. And I think everybody's hope is kind of in various places. It doesn't necessarily have to be happiness. Hope can be placed in any different thing. Does that make sense, what I'm trying to say there? Yeah. For me, it was placed in becoming happy again. And so the second step of happiness I learned was I was spiraling down back into my depression, and it was a daily battle of every single day, what am I going to do to stay on top of this depression, anxiety, and grief? And I was spiraling down, and I got the little voice in my head that said, go find somebody to serve. And I was like, okay. So I stomp out into my living room, and I look out my door or my window, and I see across my street, my neighbor's yard had weeds up to my knees. And I just got this feeling, go mow their lawn. So I'm like, this is so insane. I don't know these neighbors. So I go over there and I knock on the door, and they don't speak English and I don't speak Spanish. And I'm just like, can I mow your lawn? And they're like, looking at me like, you weirdo. And I was like, please just let me mow your lawn. Please let me mow your lawn. And they were like, okay, sure. So they literally just watched me mow their lawn for 20 minutes as I'm plowing down these weeds. And I came back to my house, and I didn't go back to bed that day. I was giggling all day at how ridiculous I must have looked. I was in my pajamas. It was 11 o'clock in the morning with this random lady just mows your lawn. And it was it made me giggle. And I realized the power that service has of random acts of kindness. And so right then I discovered that part of my happiness was to implement opportunities to serve others. And whenever I would start feeling myself spiral, I carried cards that said, "You've been a victim of a random act of kindness, pass it on." And even just something as simple as like buying a candy bar and giving it to the cashier, or telling her to pass it on to the person in the back, or buying ice cream for the car behind you when you go through a fast food restaurant. I mean, it can be so simple and so cheap. And I quickly discovered that a $1 random act of kindness made me so happy. It was such a small investment in my joy that it made it easy. And I discovered that happiness is truly is looking outside of yourself and to stop focusing on what is hurting you and start focusing on how you can help other people create joy in their life. Like, our happiness revolves around what happiness we can create in other people's lives.
Yeah. Yeah. So I hear that by serving others and seeing the joy in other people's faces and the light in their eyes, this also gave you happiness. And so isn't it such a different context? Because sometimes we think of happiness in terms of what we own, or our house, or all these other things. A lot of times what we have, but yet it seems like true authentic happiness is such a deeper, sincere, authentic, joyful place.
Yeah. The next level of happiness that I found would probably be, I'm trying to think of that. I think there's 4 steps of happiness for me that really, truly made a huge difference for me. And this one I actually found when I was in jail in London. And do you want the details of that story, or do you want me to just tell you what I learned?
You can share whatever feels most authentic to you. If you want to, you can share the story, or if you want to just talk about what you learned, that's okay too. Okay.
I'll make it fast because it's kind of a long story, but it's a really funny, not funny kind of story. So, okay. So this was a big moment in my development of hope and happiness. And it came, we were supposed to go to London. I'm a photographer, and I was invited to shoot a wedding at a castle, 40,000 square foot castle on a lake. It was going to be gorgeous. And I was invited to go over my 1-year anniversary with my second husband. And I was so happy because I was like, all of these hard things are finally coming to an end. And now God is opening doors for me to create the life that I've always wanted to live, to do the things that I love, to see the world that I love, and to get paid doing it. That was my vision of what London was going to be. And I was kicked out of his house 4 weeks before we were supposed to go. And we were supposed to go on our 1-year anniversary, and it was supposed to be on our anniversary trip. And he kicked me out. And the night that he kicked me out, we ended up moving all day long. And the night that we moved into my parents' house because they live in Cabo half the year. And my dog had broken his back the night before, and he was on medication that gave him the runs, and he couldn't squat. That's an important piece of this story. I just have to paint the picture. And so we move out, and at 11 p.m., my son says, "Mom, what's that noise?" And I had grown up in this house, so I knew exactly what it was. And I said, no. And I run downstairs, and my parents' basement was flooding. They had just recarpeted. Nobody had ever walked on the carpet. And my dog goes outside to go poop, and he comes in, and a dog who can't squat and who has the runs, he has stuff running down his hind legs. I had to turn off the water main, so I didn't have any water to wash him with. And here I have this giant mess. It's ice cold water because it's snowing outside, and we have no heat in the house. And it was already an emotionally taxing day because we had spent all day moving out. And I remember just hovering over my dog in the bathtub and just crying and just saying, "When is enough enough? How much are you going to ask of me?" And my kids came and they snuggled me and they just held me. And it was just this moment of complete connection with my kids, just feeling that strength of family, even from children who were 7 and 9 at the time. They were little, but that like unity and that bond of the family of we can get through anything was so comforting to me in that moment. And we got the mess cleaned up. And the next day I was like, I'm still going to London. He is not stealing this opportunity from me. I am still going. Nobody could go with me, not a friend, not a parent, not a sister, not a sibling. And I was like, you know what? It's just going to be me and God. I am going to go and I'm going to have like an eat, pray, love kind of experience. I'm going to receive downloads and I'm going to journal. And it's going to be this connective experience with God. And he's going to teach me and it's going to be amazing. And I'm going to have this like, kind of just this like coming into my own experience in London, right? I had never traveled alone and I had never traveled internationally. And when I got there, the customs agent said, "What are you here for?" And I proudly told him, "I'm here to photograph a wedding." And he said, "Whose wedding?" And I told him. He said, "Where?" And I told him. And all of a sudden he starts to write everything down verbatim. And I was like, "Why are you writing this stuff down? Is there a problem?" He goes, "We're going to have to ask you a few more questions." They take away all of my belongings. They leave me with my book and my blanket. And the book that I had was The Power of Positive Thinking. Ironic.
Right.
So they take me back into the detention center. And the lady, she says, "Do you know how I know you're innocent?" And I said, "Innocent for what? What did I do? Don't even know."
Yeah.
And she takes my picture and she goes, you know how I know you're innocent?" I said, "How?" And she goes, "Because you smiled when I took your picture." And I was like, that's what I do for a living. I can't be like, I don't know that I don't have a reason to not be smiling right now.
Yeah.
She takes my fingerprints and they come and they said, they asked me for my paperwork and I had given them my paperwork given them my passport. And he said, "No, where's your work visa?" And I was like, "No, I thought work visas were only if you were coming to the country for more than 3 months and working. I'm only shooting a wedding here." Anyway, long story short, he comes back and he says, "We've determined you're not a genuine visitor in our country. We're sending you back to the United States first thing in the morning. And you can't stay in the airport. So we're transferring you to our facility." And I was like, no. So in my head, I'm thinking Motel 8, like on the airport premise, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it's not until I get into the vehicle with bulletproof glass, no door handle, and steel seats that I realize they're taking me to jail. They're taking me to jail.
Oh,
so I get there and they have the full shebang, the barbed wire, the 100-foot walls. It's just the barred windows, all of that jazz. And when I finally get in to my phone call that they gave me to my mom, she said, "Whatever you do, find a Bible." And I found a Bible and I just flipped open to Jude and it said, "Base your esteem in your faith in Jesus Christ. Keeping yourself in the love of your Father." Don't quote me on that. That is not even verbatim, even close, but just with the gist. And right then, the Spirit just spoke to me and said, "It doesn't matter who loves you and leaves you. It doesn't matter who thinks you're a saint and who thinks you're a criminal. All that matters is that God knows who you are, where you're going, and how to get you there." And I had just had it. And I literally like banged my hands into the steel floor or into the cement floor. And I just said, I'm done. And I was just so angry and so over the pain and the heartache and the things that just didn't work out for me in my life. And as I crawled into bed, I whispered to God and I said, "But if you need me to, I still will." And that moment of complete surrender to what God needs me to go through to learn about his nature, I was willing to go through that no matter what. I wouldn't give up, that I would trust in him to put me through whatever he saw fit to learn the lessons that I needed to learn to qualify to be with him again someday. And so to become teachable and to surrender to the lessons in the pain was giant. And as I was flying home that next day, I was journaling. And again, the Spirit taught me, when we shift our perspective and we look at our adversity and simply shift it to our university, our tribulations are just our education and our trials are just our test. And we are all enrolled in the University of God.
Ooh, I love that.
I know, it was so profound. I'm like, I am so not this creative. Like I know this is coming from God because I'm not that like creative. I mean, anyway, so that was a really big turning point to me because it really got me into a space of being willing to do whatever it took to get through the pain, but to also embrace the pain as a positive thing because I recognized that it was a benefit to me because I was learning. And when we learn and when we grow, we are better off for it. And so I think sometimes we look at these negative experiences thinking we're worse off for them. And we are worse off for them if they make us bitter. But if we learn from them and grow for them, then they make us better. And then it makes the pain worth it.
Thank you so much for sharing that because our painful experiences really can cultivate this meaning and purpose in our lives. And then we have the ability to share this purpose with others, right? And so our life becomes a message instead of it being like, all of these things are being done to me, they're being done for me. So that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I wonder if you would, just to kind of close up, if you wouldn't mind sharing how your higher power helped you. I mean, you've already shared a lot of, obviously you're very connected to your higher power. But one thing that the research shows, but that we hear time and time again from survivors, is that having some kind of spiritual practice and having some kind of connection to their higher power really helps them in recovery. And so I'm just wondering if you could speak to how you were able to heal, like some of the, obviously finding the happiness throughout your life and the levels of happiness and joy. But if there were like any daily practices that helped you, and then other things that helped you with healing day to day.
Yeah. I realized one of my biggest things was that I really wanted to maintain a relationship with my son after he died. I really, really, really believe in the afterlife, and I really wanted to stay connected to him. And I prayed relentlessly that God would keep those doors open for me to be able to have experiences with him, to feel him, to know him, and to connect with him. I learned though that to be connected, it's okay. How do I phrase this? You have to be connected to the pain to also be connected to the joy. God taught me you can't be connected in 90% of your life and disconnected from 10%. You have to be all connected or disconnected. And so I really had to truly embrace the pain of the grief to be able to connect to my son. I had to be okay with that pain because I wanted to be with him. I have a journaling practice where I literally will just journal. And depending on who I want to speak to, sometimes it's James, sometimes it's my higher power, sometimes it's my higher self, sometimes, higher power meaning God. And I will just open the letter and just open a conversation. For me, I pray verbally every day, but for me, I really love to journal where I will literally just journal my thoughts. Like, I really would like a message today. If there's anything that you need to convey to me, please let it be known to me. And then I just sit and I listen. And I really learned that we disregard our thoughts too frequently and too easily as just thoughts. And we don't give weight to our thoughts as possibly being more than just our own thought. We dismiss them. And I realized that when we give weight to them, that maybe they're more powerful than we are realizing. And we give weight to them and let them grow. If they grow, then I know that it's not my own. So that's one thing. I also meditate. I'm also a yoga instructor. I became a yoga instructor. Yoga has been wildly healing. And really the final and highest level of happiness for me, that is a daily action that has wildly changed my life, was the experience when I was prompted to write a stranger's obituary. I didn't know him. And I called his family and I found out this 19-year-old boy had passed away. And I just said, I would really like to serve your family. How do you need help right now? And at first she was just like, no, I don't need that. Like, I don't need help with anything. I'm fine. Like, that's most people's reaction, especially coming from a stranger at a very sensitive time in life. And I just said, I would really like to serve you. Can you, I know that you don't, I know you feel awkward receiving service right now because it's hard to receive. And I said, but if there's any way that I could serve you, would you please let me know? And she's like, well, I haven't been able to put words together for his obituary or his, is it epilogue? For his epilogue. So she said, I haven't been able to do his obituary. I'm not a very good writer and I'm not good with words, or his epilogue. And she said, will you help me write that? And I said, absolutely. And I went over and I sat with this family's grief for 12 hours as I learned about this boy and helped put their love into words. I'm a writer, and so it's a gift for me, and it was something that I could give to them. And that is when I was taught that the highest level of happiness is giving something to someone else that they can never repay you for. Giving something to someone that they can never reciprocate or repay you for. And so I actually live that every day. How can I give something to somebody that they cannot reciprocate? And that has been the greatest healing piece day to day, as well as bringing me my greatest joy and happiness in life is practicing that one thing.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. It's incredible to listen to the growth process from the very beginning of your journey and all that you have learned and all the wisdom and insight that you have gained. I want to thank you so much for sharing your story. And is there a way that listeners could get connected with you?
Yeah. So this is actually,
do you have a blog or a website or anything?
So yeah, I did have a website, but we temporarily put it down. So I've just started a platform on TikTok of all things. I never thought I would be a TikToker, but here I am at 15,000 followers later, and it's growing. And I put out videos all the time of hope and healing and happiness. On my TikTok page, it's under Michelle Ellsworth because my nickname is Shelly.
Oh, awesome.
So it's Michelle, Michelley Ellsworth. And I just kind of share my experience and some tips and tricks on happiness and joy and healing, as well as just fun and happy stuff.
I love it. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story today, and we're inspired by all that you've been able to accomplish. Thanks again, and we will include all of the resources in the show notes, and we'll see you guys again next week.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you for listening to the Heart and Soul Wellness Podcast with your host, Sarah Carter. Make sure to like and subscribe, and if you have any thoughts about what we talked about today, leave a comment. Also, you can find us at heartandsoulwellness.org and on Facebook and Instagram. Join us again as we continue to help women heal, connect, and aspire to their true and authentic selves.